Welcome to Leadership Live. I'm Daphna Horowitz, and this is a podcast for leaders like you who want practical tips to apply in leading your business, your people, and yourself. Now, I know that leadership is a skill that can be learned, and this podcast is about doing just that. Every week, I'll talk about what really works. You'll learn to shift your mindset and practice from being good at what you do to getting great at leading people who are good at what they do so that you can get the business results that you want. Whether you're a first-time manager, entrepreneur, or seasoned executive, you're at the right place. This podcast takes you from talented expert to extraordinary leader. So get ready to master your mindset, inspire your team, and elevate your business. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. Wonderful to be back here. And today our topic is quite an interesting one. We are going to be talking about what do we want to invest in terms of prices. Now, as I say this, I want to make sure that you know that this is not going to be about financial advice. So today I'm definitely not going to give any financial advice about what to invest in, but I'm going to look at it from a different angle. And really the thing to do here is to think about what have we got to invest, and especially in times of crisis, we're talking about more than just money. And the whole idea came to me from the very famous thought or strategy from Warren Buffett around what his company invests in, or what their investment strategy generally is. And Warren Buffett's investment strategy is really basically to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing in the market, because the market is a reaction to what the majority of people are thinking and doing in terms of investment. Warren Buffett's strategy is to say, be greedy. He says they attempt to be greedy when others are fearful, and to be fearful when others are greedy. And really what he's saying is, look at what everybody else is doing and kind of see if you can do the opposite. Because if you just follow what everybody else is doing, then, you're with the mainstream, you're with the flow, and you'll experience the same results that the majority of people are experiencing. But if you go and do the opposite, you will stand out. You'll have a different strategy, and you may also then experience different results. Now, of course, you want those results to be positive, but at least it gets you thinking in a different way to what would normally be happening when you're not sure, when there's uncertainty, or even when things are going well and you're kind of going with the flow and not taking a moment to step back and strategize. In this way, you're actually thinking, okay, what's happening around me? How do I want to respond? Do I want to do something different? Do I want to take a different route? And then see, okay, what do I do with that? And that's always good advice. I did say this is not a financial advice live today. We are going to look at investment from a much broader point of view. So looking at our resources in terms of time, energy, resources, what's at our disposal at this time that we can use and invest. So let's look at what are the kinds of things we can invest in. The first thing I want to say is what we have at our disposal right now are our very basic resources, which are time, energy, money, maybe in a little bit of short supply, and support systems, community, family, people around us. And those are things that we can definitely draw on as sources of support as we go through this crisis and as we go through this pandemic. So how do we want to look at it from an investment point of view? What do we want to do? If we take the approach of going with the opposite of what we're seeing around us, we don't want to align ourselves with the fearful thinking, the fearful emotions and anxiety that are around us, because that doesn't really help. It doesn't help us to think better and get creative and really prepare ourselves for what's next. We also don't necessarily want to be at the waiting stage of just waiting for this to be over, or waiting to gain a sense of control over our lives again, or waiting for whatever's next, the next normal, the new normal, whatever the next stage is going to look like. We probably have a sense that it will look a little bit different. I think there will be things that will return to how we know and like them. And We don't know what that's going to be. So to wait is not really helpful either. So what are the kinds of things we can do, and how can, as I said, we invest our time, energy, resources in order to get ourselves ready? Now, when we get ourselves ready for whatever's next, there can also be some anxiety around that because we don't know what's coming. We don't know how to get ourselves ready. And a lot of us have been in lockdown, most of us have been in lockdown and shutdown mode for so long that it might even be a little bit difficult to go back into whatever the next stages are. How can we really look at where we are right now and use this time to invest so that when we're ready to get going, when we're ready to take the next leap, we're doing it with our energy intact and with a sense of motivation and a sense of, okay, we are ready to take that next step. We're ready to take the leap into what's going to come up. So there are 4 areas that I'm going to cover today in terms of how do we invest, how do we start thinking about where to put our energy in order to be able to be ready for the next phase of what's going to come next and what that looks like. So the first thought that I had on that was really investing in some of those things that we'd always wanted to get done, but never had the time. So pre-corona days, when we're busy, stretched in many different directions, putting our energy and our time in different places, there are always these things that we want to do when we have time. And maybe now's the time to actually invest in those. So are there any projects on the back burner that you really would have loved to have gotten done? Are there any things that you've been putting off for that day that one day when you have time, you'll get to it? Maybe now's the time to start thinking about it and seeing how do you want to work with those? How can we bring them maybe more into the top of that to-do list or more into our priority list and really spend a little bit of time doing those things? Some of the back burner projects that I'm thinking of could be really working on your website. It could be refining your marketing message. It could be looking at your team and doing a little bit of a restructure in terms of the roles and responsibilities. It could be putting down some of your processes in writing and really documenting those so that you have policies in your company that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time a new person is onboarded, or have someone explain it to them, that there's some kind of a process manual that's available. And I know those are things that my clients often say, I don't get around to doing, so it just gets left. Another one could be connecting with people that you'd like to connect with, but you just never really got the opportunity or got the chance to do it. So think about those things that have been left on the back burner that maybe you can bring to the front of your focus, to the front of your priority list. And I'll certainly share that one of mine has been writing my second book. That's something that I've really carved out time in over this period to spend focused time and energy on that. So I've been investing my time in writing my book. I'm so excited that it's nearing completion. It's with my designer at the moment and final proofread, and just the feeling of having that completed, my second book, 6 years after my first book has come out, is really exciting for me. So that's exciting news, and also really thrilled to have been able to use the time to do that. Think about those. What are your back burner projects? Another idea that I thought of where you could invest time is really thinking about, because in this time we've had to become really creative about our businesses. We've had to maybe shift our message a little bit. We've had to perhaps provide services or products that we haven't had to before. So I know there's been a huge upsurge in selling masks and all those sanitizing gels and all of those kind of things that companies have pivoted to. So if you think about how your service or product has pivoted over this period, how do you want to invest in those new offerings to take you into the next stage, the recovery of the economy, the recovery of the business? Are those things that could be helpful even in the next normal that we're talking about, and getting ready for the resurgence of energy and life and business and economies? And then a question to really think about, and I know last time I spoke about the stop, start, continue. I'm going to ask you today to think about, what are the things that you really want to take with you from this time? So what are the good things that have happened over this period that you think are worth preserving and worth taking with you into that next phase as we re-enter our markets? And what are the things that you don't want to, that you're very happy to leave behind? If perhaps you've seen an opportunity of how things can work in a different way, then maybe this is a great time to say, okay, well, I'm not doing that anymore. And I know for me, one of those things is traffic. So, with working on Zoom, I've always worked virtually. I've had business and clients all over the world. So the virtual platform has really been great. But now, over the Corona period, we've upped the level of virtual networking, virtual business meetings, virtual brainstorming meetings, and virtual sessions one-on-one. So for me, it's really going to be a question about how do I maintain some of that? So take even more of the virtual stuff with me and minimize the time spending in traffic, spending in travel time between places, between meetings. And that's certainly something I want to, one aspect of it I want to leave behind, and the one aspect that I really want to take forward. And talking about personal development, and this is another point that I really want to mention, and I will end off on this one, and that is the fourth area that we can invest in. And the thing about investing in your personal development is a really good point. What I want to add to that is I want to say, remember where we started off by saying, try to do the thing that is opposite to what everybody around you is doing. I would say that look at yourself as well and look at your own regular habitual ways of behaving in times of stress and think about how you can play with doing the opposite. And that might be helpful for you as well. So for example, if in times of stress, your normal behavior, your default response is to get busy and to get as much into action as you possibly can, like just trying to do so many things so that you can feel like, first of all, you're busy. It's kind of the spray and pray approach. So you're doing a whole lot of things and hoping that one of these things stick. And actually what that often leaves people with is a feeling of absolute exhaustion and not much traction because you're doing a little bit in so many different areas that you're not really deepening or focusing fully on one thing. So if that's your default response, then maybe try and play with the opposite, which is to really take a step back, put some time in your diary, in your calendar to breathe, to reset, re-strategize, and rethink how you want to go about your business, because that's the opposite of your normal. And the same thing, if your default response when you're under stress is to shut down, cave in, go quiet, not talk to people, ask yourself how you can do the opposite. How can you start to connect with people? How can you start to engage perhaps more with people and almost push yourself into that area of, the uncomfortable, out of your comfort zone, and say, okay, how can I stretch myself there and perhaps open myself up to other opportunities? And that's investing in your own personal growth and personal development and how you manage a crisis. That's going to be my 4-point, really taking that investment advice and applying it to our own personal development skills in terms of what can we learn and how can we grow from this time of crisis. So if I just repeat my 4 points around what to invest in times of crisis, then they would be, the first one is check for any backburner projects, things that you really wanted to do but never got around to doing. Then ask yourself, what is it from this time that you would like to keep going into the future, going into whatever's going to come up as our new normal next stage of business? What are the things we want to keep? And what are the things that we don't want to keep, that we actually want to get rid of and not take with us? And then the third thing is think about how your business, product, service, or message has shifted over this time. How have you had to become creative, change some of the things that you're doing? And is there anything there that you want to take with you? And the fourth aspect was the aspect of personal growth and personal development, which is around what is your default way of responding in times of crisis? What do you normally tend to do? And now think about playing a bit with the opposite. What would doing the exact opposite be like for you? What possibilities would that open up? And what would be different for you if you had to play around with doing something that's a little bit opposite? So that's it from me. I'm going to end with a quote from Arianna Huffington because I think it's an absolutely wonderful quote. And she says that downtime is a feature of our operating system, not a bug. And I think that when we're so busy and we're so wanting to make something happen in our difficult times, in our challenging times, we often tend to minimize on the downtime, on the taking a step back to really think and re-strategize and give ourselves a break. So as she says, it's a feature, it's not a bug. Use it. Take some downtime, take a step back, re-strategize, rethink, reset, and ask yourself how you can use this time for whatever's coming next. Have a beautiful week, and I will see you next week, same time, same place. And this wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. You can head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download many resources, including a chapter of my book that will show you how to get through tough times and define a big vision for your leadership and your business. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, and I'd be even more grateful if you'd share it with a friend, leave a review, and a 5-star rating so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. Tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.